Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Well, folks, this episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast was a pretty fun one to record. We're a little bit of a tech nerd situation going on over here. I know that might surprise a lot of you, but technology for some is a necessary evil, but for us, it really helps us do our jobs so much better. And as a total data nerd, I love doing the right things for the right reasons. And as a marketer, it's completely critical to have the right systems and the right ways to use those systems. So we dive into tech and using that traction to help drive revenue and making sure your tech stack is not just totally dragging you down. So we hope you enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to this next episode of Revenue Rewired, the podcast with all the answers. Just kidding. Just marketing and sales. Hi, Jay. How are you today?
Good morning. How are you?
I am so good. Feeling punchy.
I can see that.
All right. Okay. Well, it's about a topic I am very passionate about and excited about, which is tools. And we want to talk about, is your tech stack fueling your growth or draining it? And we're pretty passionate about this one. I think actually marketers sort of have to be, and you can either get drug along with the tool challenges or you can stay ahead of it. And either way, it's exhausting. However, they make us better and they do a lot of really good things. So where we want to talk to today is tech stack and how you can use it to improve your revenue. And before you buy another platform or do any kind of tool, audit, or investment, give us a listen. We promise this will be short and sweet. So, Jay, one of the interesting things we have is a lot of experience in this space. You've been in this industry for years, and you've seen a lot
Wow.
of changes.
Okay.
I actually remember dial-up, so I'll date myself. But
Stop.
but we do want to talk about how sales and marketing can align through the use and proper execution of a tool. So why is it though that we see a lot of companies just continuing to buy more tools? Like why do we just keep adding to the stack?
The bowl of spaghetti. Um, I mean, again, I think we've seen it all, and I do want to be empathetic here because, often the answer I get from various executives is they had inherited, whatever it is that are leveraging. I'll never forget that one story. You might remember this one where about 5 or so years ago, we were asked by a company to help them optimize HubSpot. And so they brought us in and we were coming into the opportunity thinking that it was focused on HubSpot. And when we, open up the hood of the engine, we uncover that they had not only HubSpot, but also Salesforce in place. And just the meeting got pretty comical. In that meeting, we only had the marketing department involved. And when we asked the questions why they had so many different tools in place that things were not talking together, what we learned very quickly is, well, our team likes HubSpot and the sales team prefers Salesforce. It's because the VP over the sales team doesn't know HubSpot, only knows Salesforce, and that's what they signed up for. And so we have completely different tools that we're using on the marketing side. They're not speaking to the sales side, and it was causing them so much pain. And so we were asked to help them to connect the dots between the marketing and sales side. And so we started to, with that client, if you remember, started having a conversation with them about, is there a better way to do this? And because they have that, sunk cost bias, they've already invested so much money and time into it. The discussion around maybe considering, slimming their tech stack and making sure that the teams are more unified, it added more stress to them because their teams were not aligned. They weren't, friends. There was a lot of, again, typical finger pointing going on. And so that was a really hard one where we really had to push back on the client, and luckily it ended up working out well where we did find that some of the tools they were using could go away, but it was, a little painful for us and them to find a more strategic way to do all of this. But I think that is probably part of the problem is you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. People know what they know. And if they've made a big pitch to their leadership team to buy into some kind of tool, and a lot of these tools take a lot longer, as we know, to onboard, I think it becomes, painful with the idea of, well, I don't want to look stupid, that, we've invested, six figures plus into some new tool and then having to go backwards. So I think that is where part of the problem comes into play.
I think it's very easy for a tool to become overhead and not enablement. Actually, a funny story, maybe not funny, but sad funny. A friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, I just had the weirdest phone call with Amazon. I thought someone hacked my credit card. I had all these charges, and I found out it was all the subscriptions I was paying for. It was me." And I was like, "Oh man." And I think that happens to a lot of businesses too, where our last episode or maybe a couple before that, we were talking about CMOs and setting them up for success. And how often do they come into an organization that's got a ton of tools and tribal knowledge has come and gone, and they don't even know what's being used or what's in existence. And what's amazing is really the tool is so foundational to especially sales and marketing and creating alignment. Like if they're not able to use the same tool, but at least having the understanding of what's feeding what. So there's so much then that goes into unpacking the tool and then the data. So we've talked about why enablement matters more than just like having this tool. So it's now using the tool. Do you think that it really is the leadership's job to make sure that the tool is being used appropriately, or is this someone else? Like, is it a project manager? Is it the sales or marketing leader? Like, who owns making sure that all of this is happening in the right place at the right time and feeding the right things?
I mean, it does depend, in my opinion, on the company, the size, the structure, how aligned the various departments are. But I do feel like, to your point there needs to be a champion. There's pros and cons to that alone if it's a single person. Because again, even look at our company, we'll have one person responsible for, X initiative, and then everyone goes to that one person for support. And so I think that the champion shouldn't have to be also the customer support for that tech stack item. I reflect a little bit, and it's kind of somewhat comical, but if you recall a recent chat we had with a current client, they had one of their tools in place that on the sales side, and they needed help to make it better. And we asked for a login, and that person didn't have one. And so I think there's a lot of red flags you could think about here, where if you don't have someone in your team that understands it, is leveraging it, that right there is a red flag. But back to your question, I think the leadership team needs to be the ones to set the vision for why maybe a tool might be needed to help optimize, the way they work with various different current and prospective clients. But I think from there, I think, again, you identify a champion that's going to kind of oversee it, and that champion could be more than one person. And that's the people that I think needs to step back for a second here and do like a scope assessment. Because again, what I'm finding is, and I'm guilty of this, as you know, is you hear about some kind of cool, shiny object, and you go and get a demo. And of course, those salespeople, if they're well-versed and understand our business, they're going to say all the right things, and all of a sudden you imagine sleeping better at night, knowing you have this new tool that's going to solve world hunger. And what you often find is it isn't that easy, especially because the onboarding process, even for me, I just find it always takes so much longer. And so what I think we've done over the years for ourselves and for our clients is let's stop looking at the tools and all the bells and whistles, and instead let's identify an assessment of what we need and why, and then we prioritize it, and then it's a want versus need conversation. I think if that is clear, and then the leadership team buys off on that, and they're also clear on what they're expecting. Typically, like reporting is one we often hear about because they want to have access to understanding how these tools are moving the needle around revenue growth. I think then when you go to these various different companies, it's a lot easier to assess which ones might, meet your needs. And then again, if the company offers other things that might be kind of nice to leverage, it's just gravy. But what I often find is most companies, those really cool things, those bells and whistles, that's often why people select certain tech stack items and then find they don't even use those things because they can't solve whatever problem they have or addressing whatever opportunity they wanted to focus on.
Yeah, and then we've heard this term shadow technology, shadow tech, where people create backdoor workarounds because they don't know how to do or it's too complicated to do what's necessary in the system. And that's super dangerous and scary. And I guess I led you a little bit too because there's an IT component to this as well. And I think there is maybe a little bit of misunderstanding or confusion or lack of clarity around who owns the technology. So I think again, in most businesses, the more collaborative you are, the better your revenue outcomes will be because you have a better buy off and better strategy. So if you're a marketing and or sales leader and you're the one in charge of technology, working with your internal technology teams, maybe it's IT, maybe it's RevOps, to make sure that, okay, here's the strategy for this. These are to your point, the kinds of questions that I want to get answered. And again, I think the biggest disappointment to me when I was looking for a tool for us a couple years ago was that there is not a one size fits all. This is going to
Mm-hmm.
solve all your problems solution. And I think it was such a bummer to me to find that out. And really, I probably wasted a lot of time because I didn't know that. And I kept looking and looking and looking. But if I had just kind of backed up and said, these are the things, which I did end up doing, these are the things that I absolutely have to have. They're my deal breakers. And here's why and how they tie into each other. It does make sourcing your technology and then rolling it out because sourcing the right tech is one thing, but making sure that everybody's using it is a whole nother thing.
Well, I was going to say real fast, I think to your point there, and again, I'll be fully, I guess, vulnerable around this where, I've definitely was part of the problem. Earlier on, I would identify or hear a problem. And then I'm like, oh, there's a way to solve this. There's got to be some kind of cool tech thing out there. And then off you go. And then we would buy off on this, multi-year contract and all this stuff. And then it became a huge headache. And so what I learned, to your point, and I'm really grateful for that, is by involving the other departments that are going to be touched by or need to touch that tech stack item, getting their buy off, their questions, comments, concerns up front, I think allows you to go into these things your eyes wider open. And so I think to your point there, it's just I think all the various different departments need to be bought off and excited about this. Because if you get a couple people, especially one whole department, that's like this is stupid, then of course it's not going to work well. And so I think it's good maybe to slow down a little bit because again, like I made the comment before, even the simplest tools could take months to properly integrate into your company. And so I think if you're going to invest that kind of time and money, wouldn't it be better upfront to know what you're buying before you buy into it?
Yeah. And then I think, too, our final point is making sure that your tech stack is associated with a revenue outcome. And while, yeah, the ideal situation I think would be auditing your tech stack, at least your MarTech stack every quarter, it's probably not super reasonable to ask that. Maybe at absolute minimum once a year, just because right now we're seeing so much built-in innovation with AI and platforms are outperforming each other and adding new tools and reporting and all kinds of features. It's almost overwhelming in a sense to keep up with it, which is to your point why you need a champion and you need someone to say, this isn't just a tool. It's not a wrench. It's like the car. It's so much bigger than that. It's become so much bigger than a spreadsheet. You used to be able to get away with that, but if you want to have multiple touch points and you want to start customizing and do all the things down the road that drive better and better outcomes, faster closes, more engaged prospects, like in order to enable your sales team, your MarTech stack, I think needs to be a lot more robust and be a more seriously considered part of your business. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I love that. I love the comment about the revenue piece because like, that's what we focus on. But again, it's amazing how so many people don't think about the true desired outcome. And I love the idea of having like a singular focus of like, yes, it should be about optimization and efficiency and able to help scale your resources. But at the end, if it's not going to generate revenue and or cut costs, I think you really need to question the tool that you're considering investing in.
Yeah, and I don't underestimate the need to repeat yourself to your team over and over again about why the tool is being used, why it's important, and finding that the team needs to stay on top of the innovations through the software technology companies' growth as well, because nothing is worse than having to redo work and knowing if there's a better, faster way to do something, which is ultimately what these companies are trying to do. And the speed in which they're doing it is it's mind blowing. Like imagine the meme of the hair flying back. That's what I feel like technology is doing for us. And it's awesome and super exciting, but use it. Make the tool so accessible, so driven toward those revenue outcomes that your team is like this amazing machine and the technology is a tool. It's not dragging your team down, it's not causing you headaches. Like I think there has to be a little bit of a mind shift to adopting the technology as it evolves and recognizing that it's not like it used to be where you could understand a tool and use it for multiple years. Like I'll never forget my dad learning Peachtree accounting software. He taught
Oh my
himself.
gosh.
And when they rolled out a new version, he was like, mm-mm, can't, nope, not doing it.
That's awesome. You know, Sarah, I was thinking if you don't mind, before we wrap up, I'd love for you. I know it's not really a MarTech, stack tool that's very typical, but I think talking for maybe a minute or two about our recent project management rollout. I had a bunch of other business owners that were using ClickUp is what we use now, and a lot of feedback I got was, oh my gosh, it took us years. We're still not fully onboarded. And so when you told me the team wanted to make a significant move to a project management system, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, what we have right now seems like it's good enough. I know I don't use it properly as other people don't, our team does. But I was just like, I don't get how this either is going to make us more efficient or generate more revenue, like I mentioned before. And I think, I really trusted the process and, you and the team kind of championed this rollout. And I got to say, not only did I feel like it went extremely well, but I'm actually excited about it and using it now a lot more than I did in the past. And so I feel like that's making us a lot more efficient now because of it. But I was honestly, between me and you, well, I guess now everyone, I was really scared about this because I just know it was a big investment of time and money to get everyone on our team completely switching programs. And we already were so busy. So can you maybe share a couple of reasons why that process went so well?
Yeah, I think because we did it one in stages was I'd love to do it all at once. And I'm kind of a all or nothing kind of gal. But it made a lot more sense to roll out the most important things first, like what was really driving the whole conversation. So at each stage, I really wanted to evaluate, am I doing this to solve a short-term problem? And can I look at it from a long-term gain perspective? And ultimately, I really wanted to make sure that the team had not only capacity, visibility, but collaborative communication. Because if you're going to maintain a somewhat spread out workforce, like, yeah, we can work from Spain for 7 weeks, or we have someone working somewhere else at home for a day. I didn't want to lose any opportunities for there to maintain communication inside the tool. And we do have a lot of tools. We'd gotten the feedback. It was a lot to manage. So could we find a tool that could do most of what we needed to do and roll it out in a way that didn't feel like a massive shift, like moving from a 10,000 square foot house to a 100-foot apartment? It needed to be thoughtful and strategic. And I think our open communication throughout each phase of the process, here's what we're changing, here's what we're working on, here's why it's so important. So I think one of the phases was developing a set of templates that we could work from, where now we can shift the work from being driven by the people and being driven by the template. And I know that saying that sounds so easy, but in a marketing agency that does a lot of very custom and bespoke strategies and work, that's really hard to do. And I didn't want to kill creativity. So it was also, I think, amazing to be driven by the team and not me. I did own it for the most part, like overarching, here's some decisions I'd love for us to make. Here are the dreams that I have. So the vision was driven by me, real time profitability, real time pacing, um, those kinds of things. But having the team who's actually having to execute the work, help drive the entire initiative, I think really helped make it stick, where they felt like they had buy in and owned the process. And then when we added new team members, we incorporated their perspectives as well, because whether you're new to the system or not, even if you used it 6 months ago, it's going to look different in a new company, a new way of doing work. So, it was really a long process, but I think you have to break it up into bite-sized chunks and then keep checking yourself with each phase and making sure that you're still on the right track. Did your goals change? Is your vision changed? Hopefully not. Hopefully your vision is still pretty darn clear. But I think making it fun too was hard to do, but somehow they made it work and that helped buy it off. So if you
I
can
love
make your
that part
tech
of it.
rollout fun, it really helps.
But I think you mentioned that point. I want to make sure it's clear. But the part that I really appreciated was being heard, is how, the champion of that project, Brenton, basically did go to each team member and be like, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it over the perfect ideal project management system, both for short and long term, knowing the vision we have for how we're going to grow StringCan, what is it you need and why? And then when it all, became, I would say live in the various phases, I definitely felt heard. And I know other team did as well. And then to your point about making it fun, I've sat over the years, I've been doing this for a long time, as you alluded to when we first kicked this off. That was rude. And the training process wasn't this boring thing where it's like, okay, everyone go watch a bunch of videos and then tell us what you think. We actually sat as a team, and the way that we were trained on how this is going to work, and then the contest to make sure that we were listening with the various different quizzes and whatnot. It just was a really fun process. And I think everyone really appreciated it because, we were asked to make a significant change, which was scary, but it was presented in a way of how this is going to make our lives better. And by doing that, it's going to make it easier for us to help our clients. And I just thought that I went into it with a very negative mindset, and I apologize for that. But it ended up becoming a really amazing process that gave me inspiration that, as we talk with our clients who are entertaining the idea of a pretty massive addition to their tech stack or change to their tech stack, I think if they follow a pretty strategic process like we did for the last couple rollouts that we've had, I feel like this doesn't have to be painful.
Well, and recognize that you're going to have to iterate, so make space for it. I think the mistakes I've made in the past where I'm going to do this and then I'm going to roll it out in one fell swoop. And I got to the end of a massive project, and one thing in my deal breaker list was unachievable. And it was absolutely devastating to have to abandon that entire tech rollout that costs like, it was like the biggest mistake I've ever made in this company, and I still regret it to this day. But it taught me so much, and I think that's partly why this rollout was more successful, was the mistakes I've made.
Hmm.
So please, people, don't make the mistakes that I've made. Follow a little bit of my advice potentially, because no matter what the tool is, ultimately getting your team, and this is where sales and marketing teams can get so aligned, is sharing the vision of the tool and understanding how their work helps each other. that's probably one of the biggest complaints that employees give in general is not understanding how their work feeds the machine and that it matters and it's important. And having a tool, I think, is one nice way to do that. Any final thoughts, Jay?
No, I love it. I think this actually was really helpful. I think, again, it's not all, rainbows and Skittles and whatnot. I'll be PG on that one. But I think, again, if you go into it with the right mind, as we just talked about for the last, 25 minutes or so, I feel like this is very doable. But again, my biggest takeaway is, if you already are feeling overwhelmed and you feel like adding something new is going to solve that, I think you might be unpleasantly surprised that new doesn't mean better. It might just be that you're either not working well with the current tools, and or you're not understanding the true problem you're trying to solve. And I don't try to be a pain in the butt when we're working with our clients, but I think that they always come back and appreciate us where we're asking an appropriate level of why. And we can really understand the exact true problem we're trying to solve. And you go into it with that mindset, you might find that you don't need to add. You actually might be able to delete. And again, I think the less tools we have, the better.
Yeah, less is more, and if it's not innovative or innovation, it's overhead. And if you're serious about protecting your revenue and your margin and accelerating the team, then you have to make sure that the tech is part of that revenue engine. So, whether that's making sure you have clear ownership, team buy-in, you've got audits, be honest about how it's moving the needle and why. So, all right. Well, thanks, Jay. This was a fantastic episode of Revenue Rewired. We're looking forward to connecting with you guys next week. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.